Music is pretty okay. It's whatever. Yeah, video game music is one of the best things in the universe to me because I have no swag. Music is really fun to make and experience from both a casual and critical perspective. I always try to grow my musical knowledge by listening to as many artists as I can stand. It's really rewarding to find new music to love, but I don't know, there's something about creating music to supplement gameplay specifically that's really nailed those melodies and frankly, strange at times instruments into my head. Obviously, there's a lot of well-known and beloved games soundtracks out there. Mario and Zelda, Kirby, basically every Square Enix game, Sonic the Hedgehog and its many vocal tracks. Even more ambient soundtracks like the Metroid and Resident Evil series are beloved by so many people, as they rightly should be. They are simply amazing. And as the years keep coming, more and more high-profile games with well-revered and high-production soundtracks will come out and continue to be completely disregarded by Jeff Keighley's dumb recency bias. Speaking of being disregarded though, there are so many dope soundtracks that get tossed to the wayside by publishers and fans alike, either because the game isn't a well-liked entry in a series, meaning the mechanics get a butt ton of scrutiny, with the music usually being mentioned as a quick little throwaway point. It's tied to some indie game that never gets a lot of attention in the first place. Yeah, a lot of games just get forgotten about with time, whether they're beloved or not, and their soundtracks fade with them. Most of them don't get officially posted, or don't blow up when unofficially posted by fans. I want to try to change that a teeny tiny bit with this video. I've come across an amount of obscure, underrated, and overhated games with great music in my time, so I'm gonna share some of that music with you today, regardless of whether or not I'd recommend the playing experience. Spoiler alert, but a lot of games on this list are mid. I even got my mutual buddies to chip in for an entry. First up, we've got the iconic Dork Axe over here. Welcome.
Thank you. And with me tonight is a special guest, Izzy-Doodle. Say hi, Drew.
Whoa, hey, hello, hi. Wait, anyways, and we also managed to book the Dave of Dave's Video Game Journey. Give us that freaking catchphrase.
Hey folks, Dave here.
Oh, yes. Oh, and one more thing. Not to be a watch time whore or anything,
a loser type of geek, and a slut.
but I've plucked out some pretty zany choices that 99.9% of people would not probably pick, so I'll tell you right now, you'll want to stick around till the end for those surprises, or at least skip around with the time codes. Whatever works better for you, I'm not that much of a tyrant. Alright, here's 10 wicked, underrated video game OSTs in no particular order. It's juice and jam time. Okay, let's get to the first entry on this. I can feel my credibility leaking. During the aughts and early 2010s, releasing a tie-in video game for a movie was commonly done in order to promote two products alongside each other to try and make $1 billion. A lot of games like this had really strict deadlines, look like trash, and are 2 freaking hours long. Heck, a lot of the time they barely line up with the movie it's releasing besides, because both things are conceptually taking shape at the exact same time. In 2011, a mocap animation adaptation of the classic European graphic novel series The Adventures of Tintin was released. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, creator of Boom Blocks and the greatest film director ever made. And Ubisoft released a tie-in game which features 2 whole story modes. And everyone was feeling ambitious back then. Even Jonah Hill felt some of the spirit. This game is an attempt at a cinematic platformer with weightier physics and lots of set pieces. The main problem is that in this game you have to deal with on-rails vehicles and you also have to spend the whole thing listening to Tintin's freaking Audible exclusive.
Drop your weapon, Alan! Man to man! Who do you work for, Alan? Who's your boss? Ah! Here's the second scroll. That's the scroll he stole from the Bird Brothers. Think I'll keep that. Might be useful. And now I'm going to put things straight with that Captain Haddock.
But even though it isn't really that good, I'd still recommend this game because the scope of it is a bit grander than most tie-in games, with the attempt at selling you on a worldwide adventure not unlike the film, and because the music more than pulls its weight in plenty of scenes.
He sacrificed his crew.
The The score happens to be written by Christophe Ferrand. He also did music for Beyond Good and Evil and Rayman Legends, both of which are great scores in their own rights. The score for this game was harder to write about than pretty much every other entry on this list, believe it or not, which you shouldn't because I'm completely lying to your face. It's got a lot of atmospheric stuff going on quite a bit of the time and some high energy stuff at other points. Listening to it as just a soundtrack kind of detracts from how much is going on implementation wise because Herald does a lot of separating of tracks, which heightens the experience of playing a pretty mediocre 2.5D platformer. I really like the main theme he composed for the game. It suits the globe-trotting vibe, and I really enjoy the overall tone that the more adventurous moments go for, as well as the channel shifting done to make the levels that much more immersive by the standards of a crappy tie-in game. Try the game if you want, but the movie is predictably the better of the two products, even though that's still lamer than the entire graphic novel series because it doesn't have freaking Professor Calculus in it. I'm gonna move on before I turn into the Quentin reviews of fucking Tintin. YouTube video moment here. As far as this project's concerned, I'm gonna focus on picking 5 tracks to sort of represent each game's vibe, just because each entry is basically just a mini mixtape like what I do for my bigger videos, except smaller this go around. So I'm focusing on less to try and cover more, if that makes sense. I'll be putting a little track list on the side over here and just letting them rip. Yeehaw. Blossom Tales: The Sleeping King is an indie Zelda-like. It's not the most impressive game ever, and in fact it doesn't even capitalize on its own premise very well if you ask me, but it's a nice little game that I like despite any gripes I have. If you need some 2D Zelda back in your life, you have worse options than this for sure. It even got a sequel recently that I haven't gotten to check out yet, but it's on my list because I want to give it a chance and see if the team improved some things. Being the 80 quadrillionth indie game with a pixel-based art style, the soundtrack follows suit by using a lot of chiptune sounds. Like a lot of chiptune sounds. There are so many chiptune sounds. The soundtrack is really memorable, and I'd even say that some of my favorite themes are the dungeon themes, which are very catchy compared to a lot of ones you'd find in the mainline Zelda titles. And you can definitely feel the Zelda influence in the soundtrack, because some melodies get anywhere from 2 to 90% aped, which is probably intentional. I mean, you know, the whole game is a giant reference. But it's a good demonstration of the composer's abilities to make something reminiscent of Zelda without just outright plagiarizing. And frankly, I'd say this entry is bigger than Blossom Tales, and really needs to draw some attention to the composer. When the original Blossom Tales released, they were using the name Visager Music. Since then, she's rebranded as Josie Breckner and has composed for a surprising number of smaller titles. And the songs are all bangers, especially the ones that let Josie bust away from chiptune stuff. I'm really impressed by the overall style. As you can see from the view count though, I'm one of the only people who seems to know that they freaking exist. Like, I'm sure she's getting paid to compose either way, but guys, let's all give Josie B's thing some more attention, please. Like I said before, Blossom Tales is a really great album that shows off her style super well. Here's a taste test before you definitely go listen to the full thing for real. Alright guys, per union regulations and all that blah blah blah, I get like a 2-minute break or whatever. Dork, you're up.
Thank you.
I'm headed for the coffee machine.
With me
Because I'm an adult.
Matthew Matosis is one of many on this platform that's influenced my work. He's what pulled me into this specific niche of YouTube in the first place, this in-depth style of talking about games. Among the many games I've discovered thanks to his channel, one in particular stands out, and that's Dust Force. The recommendation video made me aware of it, but really it was watching him stream the game that made me give it a try. The fast-paced platforming gameplay is easy to appreciate, but for some reason it just didn't click with me. I gave it many tries, but I never got the hooks put in me. I never felt the urge to come back to it. However, even though those Dust Force streams didn't provide the game a new hardcore fan, they did cause a certain someone to become addicted to the game's soundtrack. The chiptune SNES-inspired instrumentals evoke a sense of nostalgic maturity, an appreciative nod towards the classics while pushing forward with its own style. Although the harmonious dissonance of combining tranquil background music with a breakneck speedrun type of game is alluring in its own way, and the quick load times mixed with the endless looping of each stage's track certainly helps to soothe the player's psyche after messing up over and over. What really stands out to me is how much those first 20 seconds of each song make you feel like you've teleported into a brand new world. It's a magical feeling every time the beat kicks in with any particular track of the bunch. This could be why it was so easy for me to divorce the sounds of the game from the game itself. Over and over I would play the melodic and comforting jams, closing my eyes now and again for a while, taking it all in, even though I had listened to that particular song 3 times that day already. This became the album I threw on when in the car on my way to work, in my ears when working out, when going for a jog, when I worked from home. I bought it in vinyl form and have filled my living room with its enchanting tunes more than I would have ever expected. I'm not as well versed with music as I am with games, so after I became burnt out of whatever new album I took a chance on and liked for a week, I would default back to Dust Force. Spotify took notice of this and thankfully gave me a playlist of video game songs to enjoy. I love the soundtrack for Pyre and Axiom Verge, for Majora's Mask and Nier Automata, for Rain World and Endless Space, but no matter how hard I try, I can't pull my brain away from Dust Force.
become more dangerous. You should be especially aware of the volcanic bombs.
Well, this game can go kick a bomb into a corner and explode itself. Yeah, really not a fan of this one. A pretty watered down version of the gameplay of previous Bomberman titles because it gets rid of a lot of the polished puzzle platforming and leaves you with the quote-unquote mayhem of mediocre mulling. Meanwhile, much more meaningful moments may yet be mentally minted, making me feel mixed. This game's just a lot of running around and solving very, very basic puzzles. Every little gimmick just comes across as basic and feels very unpolished. If I had to guess, it's probably because this was made to tie in with the release of the Bomberman Jetters anime. Yes, this is technically another tie-in game, and double yes, this anime is real, and you can pirate it all on YouTube. Even the classic Bomberman multiplayer feels underwhelming here, which just goes to show they probably didn't have the time for the extra little touches. The music's not immune to this janky jank either. This is one of those games where the sound isn't programmed to loop properly. They just dumped a 10-minute WAV file into the project. So if you get lost wandering around a level, man, is this what it's like to be alone with your thoughts? Oh, thank God. Now I've gotten all my complaining out of the way. The actual musical content is amazing. I'd put this in the same camp as games like Super Paper Mario or WarioWare or even Kirby to an extent, where the songs all have these crazy cartoony instrumentations tied to very catchy melodies with a lot of layering to give the game this sense of joyous hyperactivity. It doesn't give you a lot of room to breathe in the good way that tickles my understimulated neurons. I'm not always in the mood for it, you know, sometimes I just need something calmer and focused to listen to, but when I am in need of something wacky, basically every track hits. And they're decently complex too. The Elemental Bomber theme switches between 4/4 and 3/4 time. The main boss theme is in 6/4 time. The Hige, how do you pronounce that? Oh, thanks guys. The Hige Heaven theme is in 5/4 time, which is probably my favorite time signature in the world. And credit where credit's due, this game did go the extra mile in exactly one respect. Having low health triggers its own entire song instead of a freaking sound effect. You can't really say that for most games. Despite everything, Bomberman Jetters OST kind of rocks. Final Fantasy X ended up being one of my favorite entries in the long-running RPG series the first time that I played it. Its world is gorgeously rendered even for PS2 hardware and looks even better in the remaster. The characters are fun to hang out with, the combat's a little repetitive but really strategic and satisfying, and the music composed by the exhausted DILF trio of Nobuo Uematsu, Masashi Hamauzu, and Junya Nakano. I just cannot place enough emphasis on their DILFness, and on an unrelated note, this video is actually brought to you by the service Manscaped. Shave your pubes so you can get laid, boys. Just insert our product directly into your Sorry, this game's just so horny for women that I wanted to balance it out a little bit. None of those things I said about the game are original by any stretch, and neither is saying that Final Fantasy X-2 is lame according to most players back in the day. But guys, it's really not that bad. I get that essentially doing a Persona 5 premise causes some whiplash in a sequel with returning characters, but personally it's really enjoyable as its own thing, and the tonal change I can really appreciate because it lets Yuna get a freaking break after the stuff that went down in the first game, and I get an amen. From the second the second game fully kicks off, it really establishes a totally different vibe. Whereas 10-1's version of this world was played very naturally with an island vibe going on even in more techie areas, this game launches into a premise where our three main heroines are basically running around playing Charlie's Angels and using weird technology pretty frequently to augment their looks, their movesets, even their personalities somewhat. It's way more sci-fi. I mean, look, even the UI is all computery. To go along with this is a far more synthy score, which has full-on pop ballads that I probably can't play. I really want to though. But it's got lots of hard beats and electric guitar pieces, especially in the battle themes that try to pump up the girls as a super spy team. All the returning areas have new themes now that I am sort of mixed on, admittedly, but by and large they're very chill and beautiful to listen to with plenty of nice piano pieces sprinkled in. Now those feel more in line with the first game with how relaxed they can be. I think that's really this soundtrack's greatest strength. It uses that balance of being in a relatively unchanged natural world with the new Totally Spies premise to drive the musical direction and do what Final Fantasy scores always do best, give you the feels by hitting you with some good musical variety. Even if this was at the start of that era where Uematsu-san had basically dipped out of composing for the series, in fact the whole team from 10 had been replaced by Noriko Matsueda and Takahito Eguchi for this entry, which makes me soft. This soundtrack is still pretty great. I think it deserves to be remembered more fondly, just like the game it's attached to. Seriously, if you like it when games go bananas and are willing to sink some time into a cozy world with happy-go-lucky characters, I would really recommend 10-2. Oh man, which it's already break time again. Well, Dave, I guess it's your turn. Break a leg, man. I'm gonna go get yet more espresso.
Hey folks, Dave here. When Drew asked for my input on obscure game soundtracks, my mind immediately went to the adventure genre. But what to pick? The theme of Space Quest? The intro music of The Seventh Guest? There's the theme to The Secret of Monkey Island, but that's far from obscure. Then it hit me. Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders. I played this game as a teenager, and to this day, my prevailing memory of it is that the music that plays during the intro is kick-ass. He wants to write a book, so his boss sends him on one last assignment to Seattle to write a story on a two-headed squirrel that's been spotted. During this assignment, Zach discovers a crystal which causes him to meet up with Annie, learning that the Earth is under attack by aliens that are trying to make humanity stupider. Two of Annie's cohorts are on Mars, and it's up to the four of them to travel across both planets to put together the device from Zach's dreams in order to save humanity. For a game from 1988, it's impressive, controlling 4 characters across a slew of different locations, and while you can die or softlock the game, it's not as ruthless as other adventure games of the time. Replaying it for this project, I did not enjoy myself. The puzzles are fun for the most part, with multiple solutions, but there are also a lot of mazes to walk the characters through. Also, flying around Earth isn't cheap, and it is possible to run out of money and get stranded if you aren't careful. The game looks and sounds good for its day, which is a nice segue into talking about the soundtrack. I mean, that is why we're here. The music in Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders is sparse. After the intense intro music, it goes quiet, with very few sound effects. The airports tend to have music, along with certain areas of the map, but none of it is as memorable as the intro. Oh, there is one track I want to mention. On Mars, you need to use a boombox to record the pitches emitted by a mystical sphere. There is already a tape in the boombox you can play. This is what comes out. I should also mention that the version I'm playing is the DOS version. If you buy the game from GOG.com, the default is the graphically and musically superior FM Towns port, but I wanted to play the original. So because of the sparse nature of the music, I thought instead of the countdown, I'd just play the intro in its entirety. First the DOS version, and then the FM Towns version. Here's the DOS version. I especially like the synth drum beat. It adds a real kick to the track. Although, if you think that intro goes hard, listen to the FM Towns version. It's like the DOS track walked so the FM Towns track could run. I do like the added layers of this version, especially the horns, but I still prefer the DOS version. I think it communicates itself better as a track, rather than having the listener be overwhelmed by bombast.
Beautiful Joe is a really in-depth action game that I completely suck Mondo brink at. Probably the best YouTube content you can find on it is Matthew Matosis' full-on commentary he did over a whole playthrough. It's very interesting. And if you can't tell, me and Dork are both pretty big Matthew Matosis fans. But Beautiful Joe has a lot going for it and a massive skill ceiling to reach for. All things considered, Beautiful Joe is a pretty popular game for its genre and was more or less a relative success, though still mega niche. Cult hits like this tend to fade with time, which is why I'm taking this slot up to remind everyone that this game exists and its OST is a total banger. It's techno jam after techno jam. One would think a movie-themed game like this would have a ton of melody aping with a more orchestral style, but despite how weird the electronic style may feel at first, it's just so good that who cares? Plus it fits Joe's obnoxious personality like a glove if you ask me.
Cool. A real V-Watch. I always wanted to try one on.
But the movie references aren't forgotten about. The opening literally parodies the iconic 20th Century Fox fanfare. And since most of the boss fights are, tangentially related to a movie trope in some way, you can hear some light leitmotif homage in them. This is just a great score full of energy that feels subversive but ends up fitting its main character and genre better than any orchestra could. That went on to suit the Wonderful 101 superhero stylings anyway. I know zilch about this entry's about something else. I was introduced to the composer of Far Changing Tides and its soundtrack, through an episode of the insanely underrated video game music podcast Level with Emily. It's gotta be one of my favorite podcasts because of how informed the host, Emily Reese, and her guests are about music of all styles. She asks really in-depth and intelligent questions to really intelligent people with in-depth histories in the game's music industry. That's taught me so much about implementation, music theory, and how many composers are total awkward nerds when given the chance to spill about their work. The podcast is on both Spotify and right here on YouTube with video versions. They've also got a Twitter and a Patreon, etc., blah, 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 blah. Go check them out and support them. In the podcast episode where she speaks with Joel Skok, this Swedish guy who made the music for Far, you know, the game I'm pretending this segment is about right now, Joel said something really interesting. He makes a lot of tracks with really dense, lofty arrangements. Like, all the audio space is filled with a lot going on, but it still feels open because of how it's mixed and arranged. Something he said in that episode that really stuck with me is that he tries to add and add and add until he can sing over it and it doesn't feel empty. Now, that's not a direct quote, I'm paraphrasing, which is why you should go listen to it, but that's a really interesting way to think about sound mixing. One of my resolutions for 2023, the year this video is releasing, just so I can date myself as much as possible, is to play more indie games and get more variety in my gaming diet this year. So purely on the basis of the music alone and the little footage I've seen of it, Far Changing Tides is definitely on the list for the year, or whenever I get around to it. The passage of time is not unlike an arrow, as it were. Yippee! Dead Heat Riders was actually really difficult to get footage of because it's actually an arcade cabinet. I could have sworn my local arcade bar had one of these, so I wanted to go check, but they didn't have it. So I got insanely drunk for nothing. Thanks, local arcade bar. But this game is actually composed by the funky uncle himself, Mr. Hideki Naganuma of Twitter fame. He also composed Jet Set Radio and Sonic Rush, plus some other little indie titles and arcade stuff. His style always revolved around a heavy hip-hop influence with tons of unique samples within them. I think a lot lot of people would say specifically the vocal samples stand out, which is true. They're definitely the most memorable parts of Naganuma's songs because he kind of builds an in-song narrative around them. But there's so many other interesting samples he's pulled from, which plenty of other YouTube videos have begun chronicling. Very helpful for someone like me who takes a lot of inspiration from this guy. In fact, for my new channel theme song, I used a video like that to find and use one of those same vocal chops if that ends up sticking out to you. This game is really just more of the same from him, which isn't an insult because this guy has taken 0 L's musically. And if you're even slightly interested in checking this OST out, it is literally 6 songs long. Absolutely no time investment, and it also makes my job here a lot easier. And here we are, the final and most wicked underrated OST tucked away at the end here. Dude, this one's so obscure. Just bear with me a second to explain this thing, or a couple minutes. I genuinely don't know how long this will take. We had lots of dinky little titles you could get on the shopping channel. Through Space is one of those. Well, that took way less time than I thought it would. Like number 9, numero 9. I literally have no way of getting footage for this game other than potentially bricking my 14-year-old system or trying to get my glorified tablet to run Dolphin. Jesus, can you believe I edit videos on this shit? It's a small, enormous miracle. And you know, I could try and get Through Space up and running on Dolphin, but this video is getting less than 100 views, so, I mean, not that it makes a difference either way, because basically every rip of the soundtrack has freaking sound effects in it, but the OST has a very nostalgic vibe for me, really capturing the Wii's vibe with some really strong electronic beats, some decent drum and bass, and a lot of synthy bossa nova. I don't know why that was so common in the fucking Wii era, but it was. It's very in the vein of stuff like Wii Sports or Mario Kart Wii, with a bit more of an intentional kick to some of the songs. The soundtrack is about as long as the game itself, like Dead Heat Writers, so there's not a whole lot for me to even say. Just check it out. It's not often you're gonna get recommended music from some almost totally lost Wii game, right? But I mean really, aside from things like FFX2 or even Beautiful Joe, how many of those would you have been recommended in the first place, right? It's like I said though, a lot of games just get forgotten about with time, whether people like them or not, and their soundtracks fade with them. Heck, I completely forgot about all these games until I specifically was hunting for entries for the list, and I couldn't even reach a clean 10 with my knowledge alone. Dork Axe came in clutch, reminding me about Dust Force, and Dave helped jolt the part of my brain that knew old PC adventure games even exist by bringing up Zach McCracken. This was a great project for me to undertake. I really enjoyed myself. Music means a lot to me, and I wanted to share some of that with my Moot friends and with you guys. I hope I did that. I hope you go check out all the games and composers and podcasts that I brought up. I really hope you got something out of this, because like I said a sec ago, it made me real happy to make it. I don't have a Patreon or anything to plug, so I guess just like, subscribe. Oh, leave a comment if you have any obscure OSTs to recommend. I'm open to listening to more all the time, and I'm even open to making another video like this as well, maybe specifically focusing on community feedback. Okay, that's finally it for this project. It's been a long time coming because I had a hard drive crash. I needed to make completely new art assets, change my physical form. As far as you know, this is what I actually friggin' look like. So I had a friend record some vocals for me for a new theme song, and I started teaching myself animation to make a little outro. So that's what you're about to see right now. So I hope you enjoy it, and bye.
The more it stays the same, the more that it will change. The more it stays the same, the more that it will change. Never fading, never nothing. Never fading, never nothing.